Research clearly indicates that families with an active father are better off financially. This means that children with active fathers will be more likely to have access to resources that facilitate healthy development, such as food, clothing, shelter, and quality medical care. Children with absent fathers are almost 4 times likely to be living at poverty level. Most of the essential life skills that children need to survive are learned within the home. Fathers have a unique opportunity to teach their children valuable skills that will enable them to grow up to be healthy and productive adults. In addition to financial support, children also need emotional support from their parents. Active fathers listen and support their children when they experience joy, sadness, anger, fear, and frustration. Fathers who support their children emotionally tend to raise children who are more in tune with the needs of others. Availability and accessibility of a father is also important. A father can be physically present, but not really there if he is sleeping or not paying attention to the child. Positive interactions strengthen the bond between father and child. The quality of father-child relationships impacts a child's social emotional development, including peer relationships. The amount of time fathers actually spend with their child can vary greatly. A study done by the National Center for Fathering shows that play is the most frequent activity that fathers engage in with their children. Other more frequent activities that fathers engage in with their children are eating or feeding, talking with, bedtime reading, and watching television. When it comes to other day-to-day care experiences, time that fathers spend providing direct and indirect care for their children varies. Direct or physical care includes the time fathers spend bathing, feeding, and dressing children. Indirect care includes things like arranging for childcare, scheduling doctor appointments, and talking with teachers on the phone. This chart indicates direct evidence concerning the benefits of a father's involvement with their children. The child is benefited cognitively and academically, as was previously discussed, but there are other positive correlations with children's overall life satisfactions and their experience of less depression, less emotional distress, less expressions of negative emotionality, such as fear and guilt, and less psychological distress. There is a greater sense of social competence, social initiative, social maturity, and a capacity to relate with others, and to form long-term friendships. There is a lower risk for behavior problems, and adolescents were 80% less likely to have been in jail. This chart shows evidence of the benefits on the father when they are involved. The father's self-concept and self-esteem, the way a man perceives himself, and the positive or negative value he places on himself as an individual relates directly to his perception and value of himself as a father. Becoming a new father changes a man's sense of himself. Many men report that after they become fathers, they display different aspects of themselves at work and at home. The experience of becoming a father allows men to develop their more nurturing characteristics at work, and they often become more organized at home. Having a new baby causes fathers to become more adaptable and interested in the lives of their coworkers. Studies that compared the self-esteem or self-concept of the father both before and after the birth of his child found that these two concepts remained stable across the first 2 years of parenthood. On the opposite end of the spectrum, there are negative effects for children when fathers are absent. A child is more likely to become a substance abuser of drugs, alcohol, or tobacco. They are susceptible to criminal behavior, more likely to live in poverty or near poverty, and more likely to develop health problems that may result in more hospital visits and increases in medical treatment for accidents and injuries. They may also have a higher likelihood of developing asthma and may complain of headaches. Positive academic outcomes are not likely. Psychological and emotional outcomes, such as depression and destructive disorders, are likely, and suicide is a potential result. Children with absent fathers could potentially develop problem behaviors at school and may have negative relationships with their peers. There is also the propensity to have more sexual activity that may result in teenage pregnancies. Another note, even when fathers are not living at home, active involvement is still greatly beneficial to children. And as you can see from this chart, it helps us as caregivers as it relates to behavior problems. This is incentive enough to include and involve father figures. As child care providers, it is important that we consider what possible obstacles there are to involving fathers into the experience of the child care environment. Once we identify those obstacles and commit to father involvement, we can brainstorm ways to overcome these obstacles and encourage father involvement. One possible obstacle is work schedules. It is common to feel that fathers do not have or cannot create the same flexibility in their work schedules that mothers may. In actuality, fathers most likely do have the same flexibility, yet it is not often expected of them. We must change our assumption that a father's work is more important than a mother's and encourage fathers to take time to make involvement a priority as often as possible. Father involvement is not often valued, and we tend to resist male involvement. This feeling can come from our own cultural biases and the old-fashioned idea that fathers are the breadwinners while mothers are the nurturers. We know, however, that this is not applicable in mainstream society. Mothers today work equally as hard as breadwinners in the majority of families today, and fathers have stepped up to provide more of the nurturing duties in the household. If we can work to change our thinking about this as caregivers of children, perhaps we can learn to value father involvement. There is often a focus on biological fathers rather than on other male figures in a child's life. We may discount the importance of a stepfather or grandfather or other male figure in the child's life. We mustn't assume that we know what the family dynamics are. It may take some observation and investigation to discover who the important people are. Sometimes it comes down to a lack of training for staff and the misunderstanding that in our profession we are dealing with the whole child. This means that each child comes with their own temperaments, their own experiences, and with their family. We cannot consider the child in its absentia of family. Sometimes we see mothers serving as gatekeepers with protective tendencies to have primary access to the child. We may even perpetuate this tendency. Consider who is typically the first person that you are likely to call when a child is sick. Discovering this, we should work even harder to find ways to encourage a more involved family unit. Often, the environment isn't male-friendly. A father may not see much that appeals to him as a male. It helps to see the environment through the eyes of a male adult and make changes that will be of more interest. Some possible ways to reach out to fathers may be by planning father or special guy nights or events, by hosting male playgroups for father and child, or by forming father support groups. There are a multitude of ways to involve fathers if we make that commitment and make a conscious effort to be more inclusive of fathers. Coming next, work through the following obstacles that may occur when working to involve father figures, and generate thoughts about these obstacles and ideas for how to work through these obstacles. Be sure to consider your own biases and feelings.